Helena, Happy New Year and welcome back to Forked. How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy New Year. I actually unplugged a little bit from,
Oh, really?
from
I
yes.
didn't know that was possible in this day and age.
I tried. I tried.
Congratulations.
hmm
So it is 2026, and for those of you who had to do without Forked for the last couple weeks as we took a little break, I just want to welcome you back, say hi. This is a podcast about food politics and food policy, in case you didn't know it, and it is produced by us here at the Food and Environment Reporting Network, where I'm the editor-in-chief, as I've mentioned before. And you can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, but we really like it if you would get it on the Fern website at www.thefern.org, or you can watch it, as I know people like to do, on YouTube. And our channel on YouTube is at Fern News. Now, Helena, I know that you have something of a bit of a newsletter business going on. Why don't you tell all these good people about your newsletter before we get started?
Yes, I will do that. But also, I want to say that I don't watch podcasts on YouTube. People should, because it's fun. Other than Amy Poehler's podcast, Good Hang, which is a great watch. It's good to be back, Ted. I think everyone missed Forked. I'm glad to be back. And thank you to everyone for listening. I'm Helena Bodmiller-Evich. I know lots of you know me or maybe have been following Food Fix, which is a newsletter I write twice a week all about food policy. You can get it for free in your inbox by going to foodfix.co and putting your email in there. If you're not getting those emails on free every Friday, you should. It's fun and wonky and substantive and all of the things. People really like it. And if you work in food, you can upgrade to get it twice a week. And I highly recommend doing that. So foodfix.co is where you find all of that. And yeah, it's good to be back.
All right, let's jump in then. So it's a new year, and as I like to do in the new year, I like to make bold and unsubstantiated predictions about the future, and I think that's what the two of us should do.
Okay.
Bold predictions, and I'll go first,
All right.
since this was my brilliant idea.
I try to not predict what's going to happen, but yes,
Bold
let's
and
do it.
unsubstantiated. The unsubstantiated part is the key. I think that we have now reached and perhaps even gone past peak MAGA. Excuse me, not MAGA. That's going to last forever. MAHA.
Forever.
MAHA.
Oh.
MAHA. Well, I'm just being cynical. But that the impact that the MAHA movement, such as it is, has had on the nation and on our politics is as big as it's going to get. And I think that we will be, I don't know what's coming next.
Down from MAHA. Okay.
We're on the downslope from MAHA.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I think my bold and unsubstantiated prediction is that MAHA is going to be tested like never before. Like, this is really the year where rubber meets the road. Like,
Right.
Either MAHA is going to drive real policy change at the federal level and also at the state level, or it's not. And right now, we're looking ahead to 2026, and it's like, okay, we're about to see the dietary guidelines. That is a policy change in a way, but it doesn't actually like change the laws of the land. Like, it changes the federal nutrition advice, which down the road could have big implications for school meals. We may see them like define ultra-processed foods, but that's not really action in terms of like cracking down on those things. So like, I really think MAHA will no longer be able to kind of be claiming bold action unless there are some actually big things that happen this year. So that's my prediction. MAHA is going to be really tested, and they're going to keep having these political fights over things like pesticides and things like, what are we going to do about ultra-processed foods? And are food dyes actually going to get out? Like, there was just a judge that ruled or that blocked the West Virginia food dye ban for a minute here. So we'll see what happens there. So there's a lot of testing of MAHA.
I think, I honestly, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you're saying the same thing as me, because I think that testing cannot succeed because the MAHA movement itself is not nearly as coherent as a political movement as it may appear to be. It is ascendant right now. It has control in the government right now, but they had a year to do a lot of stuff, and they didn't do a lot of stuff, right?
Well, a year isn't a lot of time in federal policy land. Although, yes, they like nothing has been banned, right? Like, they have not really aggressively used the federal levers that they have. Like, that is for sure true.
And
I
food.
think yeah, on
Vaccine's a
food.
different story. Vaccine's a different story. They've
Vaccines are
been
different story, although even there, they're using they are changing policy, but it's not like they are like ripping things off the market. Like, you know what I mean? They're not
yeah.
so yes, and I'm
What
not
they
an
have done
expert
is
in that space
undermine. They have
for
undermined
sure,
rather
and they
than
are
destroyed.
absolutely coming for the childhood schedule. Major changes, like don't disagree with that. Um, it'll be interesting because going into the midterm elections, MAHA is really MAHA leaders are really pushing this idea that like the right needs to keep MAHA. Republicans need to keep MAHA if they have any chance going into the midterm. So that is one piece of leverage that MAHA has. We'll see. I really don't know. I don't know
Yeah,
what's going to
well,
happen.
that's why it's bold and unsubstantiated. All right. So let's go to our first segment of the show, which is the double take. And that is something in the food, politics, and policy world that just makes you do a double take. You can't believe it. Usually it's bad. That tends to be the
I
nature of the
mean,
show.
sometimes it's a
Yeah.
toss up. Yeah.
But in this case, I don't know that I can fully say that it's bad. I would say that it is strange, right? So the thing that I thought we should talk about is the Novo Nordisk's having won the FDA's approval for the first GLP-1 pill for weight loss. It was a couple weeks ago. I think that they got the approval
Yep.
and it is
First
getting
out
out
of the
onto the
gate.
market. First out of the gate,
Mm-hmm.
the Wegovy pill. Now, this is not strictly speaking, Helena, policy or politics, but I do think it is relevant for us to talk about. I
Huge. No,
wonder
it's
what
major.
you
Yeah.
think of it.
Well, I started writing about GLP-1s, oh, I don't know, maybe like 2 years ago. And I had the same kind of like, well, it's not really policy, but like GLP-1s are affecting the food landscape more than any other policy. And it's not close. Like they are
Yeah.
affecting demand. They are putting ultra processed food companies on the defensive. Like they are in their own way, like a major a force. They're a major force in this space. And so, while it's not policy, I agree that it's major.
Well, just let's describe that for
Yeah.
us because I'll go over a few stats that I looked up. So I saw in one study that something by the middle of 2024, these numbers I would assume have gone up dramatically.
Hmm.
16% of American households had at least one person who was taking a GLP-1 drug like
Yeah.
Ozempic or Wegovy. And now I believe a more recent study showed that 12% of American adults are taking it, right? And that is a
Wild.
whole bunch load of people. And what you see is that it works. People start to lose weight.
Hmm.
And that when they start to lose weight, they start spending less and less money on food,
Hmm.
including or in particular on all the foods that we shouldn't be eating, which is the ultra processed foods, the McDonald's of the world, the fast foods, all those kinds of things. The spending by Americans goes down. The caveat and the weird thing about it, beyond just the idea that there could be a mass change in the American diet based on a pharmaceutical,
Hmm.
which is a weird thing, is that people do come off the drug, you can't stay on it forever necessarily. Well, maybe you can, but when they do come off it, people gain the weight back. And not only do they start going back to eating those bad foods that they were eating before, they actually eat a little bit more of them. So it's not like a clear-cut silver bullet, we have solved the obesity problem in the United States through the miracle of modern science, but I don't know what it is, right? It's
Okay.
something else.
Yeah. I mean, the way I think about GLP-1s is like they give you a shield against the food environment that we are in. So it's kind of like big pharma and big food
Yeah.
duking it out, and we are just in the middle. Like that's how I think about it, is that
I think
it's
that's a great way to put it because it shows that it's really not necessarily towards the benefit of the American consumer,
well, it's an economic battle
right.
is what it is. And the reason I started covering GLP-1 so early, and I actually got some people kind of rolling their eyes like, this will never scale, this will not be like a thing, or this will not be as big of a thing as everyone was making it. The reason I started writing about it is because the Wall Street analysts were taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Like they were crunching the numbers, like even if demand only goes down a little bit for this or that, like we're talking massive changes. And so they flagged it early as a financial risk for particularly packaged food companies, but also like sugary drinks, like even alcohol. I mean, it really reduces demand for alcohol and sugary drinks, snack foods. But you mentioned it actually reduces overall spending on food, which is Like
It's
a
an amazing
really
thing when you think about it, because
yeah.
for decades now, as Americans have grown heavier and heavier, we've tried everything. We have done a million different things as a nation, whether it's diet books, diet fads, whatever it may be, eating like a caveman, whatever you wanna do, right? Eating grapefruits,
We've had
and
fad yeah.
nothing works. It is a truth of the American society and culture that you cannot change the way that we eat meaningfully in a positive way until we created a drug to do it, right?
Well, so yes and no. Okay, I think it's true that like every fad, every diet fails, and like what you see in the research is that like diets, they just don't work long term. Like diet and
Yeah.
exercise is not actually like you can absolutely get healthier, you can improve your markers. These are still things that are worth doing, like adding fruits and vegetables, whole grain, fiber, adding protein, whatever. Those are all good things to do. Exercise is one of the best things you can do for your health, regardless
It's
of
good for
whether
you.
you're losing weight.
It's good for you, yeah.
But it is not enough to take someone who has a very high BMI, like an obesity level BMI, and then take them down to a normal BMI. It is not an effective intervention on the whole. It does for certain people. Yes, they have success. I'm not saying that. Overall, it's not an effective intervention. And we've sort of been sold this as American people that, like, if you just worked a little bit harder, you could
If you
reverse
were a
this.
better
If
person,
you were
if
a
you
better
had
person.
more
And
self-control,
what I
you
think the GLP ones do is they sort of reveal that
yeah.
lie that a lot of people have bought into. So I think in that way, it does really change the way we think about it. But I would argue that we haven't tried everything in terms of policy. Like we actually have tried very little in terms of changing anything diet related disease. Like the few things we've tried are like calorie labeling on menus, which really only took effect for a couple years before it was then disbanded during the pandemic because restaurants were struggling. I
Yeah.
think it's come back in a lot of ways, but hasn't really ended up being a panacea in any way. We banned trans fat. That was one really major thing the government did. Other than that, it's like, Michelle Obama updated the school meals program, added some fruits and vegetables, cut some calories, cut some fat, but like
Our
it's
MAHA
not
friends
like we and
throughout
now
the
they're doing
dies,
some
that's
food
about
dyes,
it.
although those are
Yeah.
on their way out. So like it's like, yes, the American people have tried everything. They've tried all these fad diets, and like that is absolutely like true
I think
that
that's a
so
great
many people,
point.
but like,
Yeah.
has the federal government really meaningfully tried to reduce and reverse the diet related disease epidemic in the US? I would argue no. Like, at
I
least
think
not
that's a
since
great
I've
point.
been covering it.
No,
So,
no, I think that's an excellent point,
so,
and it actually it also I wanna segue as we move out of this subject and get on to our next part, to a little bit of politics surrounding this, because I found this quote from
mhm,
RFK Jr., this was in 2024, and he was being asked about, the GLP-1s, and he was talking about
mhm.
Novo Nordisk, who makes Ozempic and Wegovy, and he said that these companies were counting on selling it to Americans because we are so stupid and so addicted to drugs. I think it is fair to say he does not think that right now, at least publicly.
This
Maybe
was
he thinks we're still
before, was
stupid.
this on the campaign trail?
Yes. It
Before
was
he would.
before he became head of HHS and started working for Donald Trump, who has cut a deal with these companies to lower the costs of these drugs,
Mhm.
which is a whole separate ball of wax. The cost of the pill,
Yeah,
while lower now,
way
still pretty
lower.
expensive, but it's still pretty expensive if you don't have insurance for it.
Yeah, $150 a month, I think,
Yeah.
is Wegovy.
That's
So
a lot.
like that's like it would be like a really high-end gym membership. Like that would be no, but like when I first started writing about this, it was like 1,200 a month.
Yeah.
So it's a lot cheaper than it was, but yes, it is still out of reach for like many, many people. Yep.
All right, so why don't we leave it with that, with the thought of RFK Jr. calling us all stupid, and move on to our next segment, which is forks and knives, the main meal, the thing that is driving the conversation in the food, politics, and policy world in the United States. What do you think that is right now, Helena?
Yeah, so we are a few days into January as we are recording this. And we are right in the middle of actually what is, I think, the one really substantive policy change that MAHA has accomplished. And that is allowing states to restrict what can be purchased with SNAP benefits in many states. So there's 18 states that have been approved for various different kinds of SNAP restrictions. All of those are kicking in at some point this year, but there's several states that actually began implementing January 1. So we are a few
5.
days into
Yeah,
it.
there are 5.
And some big ones like Florida, like big economies. And what's going to be really interesting about this in the next few days is like, how do consumers react? How do retailers react? This is actually more complicated than maybe it seems. You hear it and you're like, oh, well, if you ban sugary drinks and candy, well, that's really simple. But then, there's all these things at the margin. So, like, I think the one example that really caught my eye is in Florida. They are banning sugary drinks, candy, and they're also banning ultra processed prepared desserts. And you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like to a consumer, it's like kind of confusing. And so
Twinkies.
I
No
asked, no
Twinkies.
Twinkies.
Yeah.
I think that's clear. Is that that's a ultra processed prepared dessert, but they are allowing freshly baked desserts. So I immediately thought of like those Krispy Kremes that are sold at like end cap displays that are in like the boxes. So they're like
Yeah.
freshly baked, but maybe they weren't baked in the store. And I'm like, what does this qualify? Like, it really goes to show you how implementing things like this, it's a huge policy change and this is going to affect millions of people. And like at the cashier level, they're going to have to be sending people back. They're the ones that are actually going to have to enforce this.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine, like, all of a sudden you have millions of consumers who are used to being able to buy any type of food as long as it's not like alcohol. They can't do alcohol, tobacco, or hot prepared food. And now they have all of these things that are banned. And this is a really big change. Like, there are now retailers posting lists of things you
What they
cannot
have.
buy, which is just,
Well
that's a
doesn't
really
that
big
make it
change. Yeah.
that level of confusion at the implementation stage, I think in some ways why this is such an effective wedge issue. It
I
sounds
think this is
reasonable, right?
popular. I think it polls well.
Well,
It's
okay.
been a while since I've seen polling on this specifically, but I think it is
But
pretty popular.
I mean wedge issue against SNAP itself, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at this policy, you'd say, well, look, hey, the federal government should not be supporting the purchase of these things that we know are bad for people's health and nutrition. Why should we do that? That seems bad, right? But on the other hand, if you are creating this level of chaos at the checkout counter and uncertainty among people who are of low income, what they can and can't buy, you are also potentially going to be pushing people out of the system. Possibly that
Pushing
could happen.
retailers out of the system. So
Pushing retailers out
retailers
of.
will get
Yep.
knocked out. If I think there's kind of a 90-day grace period here. I think you're right. Like the
But I
chaos here
but I
in a
think
way is the point. Yeah.
the point I want to make is that it undermines SNAP itself, right? That's the I don't want to make the moral hazard argument of in either direction that the government should or shouldn't be supporting these kinds of products for people of low income. I'm not on SNAP. I feel like it's a little weird for me to say what somebody should and shouldn't be eating, but the federal government might have a role in that. But what it does is it belies the purpose of the program, makes people feel like that the program is very conditional and that people who are vulnerable to food insecurity, they're not guaranteed anything from the government in terms of food. It can be changed at any
Well,
point.
I think
And
the
if they,
shutdown proved that.
well,
Yeah.
that's for sure. But this is
Yeah.
probably even more impactful. This is like rolling out. This is going to continue happening. Whereas the shutdown, well,
Hmm.
eventually it was going to end, and it did. Right.
Yeah, I do think the shutdown, though, in a way, like undermined SNAP as just this thing that will always be there,
Yeah.
that people would count on and that we wouldn't question. And I do think that has like psychically changed. Um, I think there's kind of two ways to look at this. There's like the lens of like, does this increase program stigma, right? The stigma of being on this program because you will have to walk back and put foods away. The example that anti-hunger advocates always use is like, if this goes really far, like some states are trying to push it pretty far to include other processed products like a cake mix.
Yeah.
Are we really trying to say that a low-income mom, a single mom, cannot buy a cake mix for her kid's birthday party? Like, is that really what we want the federal government to do, right? Does that just send the stigma of, this program is restrictive and paternalistic, and so that's the argument they make. And I think that there is a real risk of increasing the stigma through things like this. The other argument that I hear being made, and I don't know where this shakes out, is that there is this maybe unexpected twist here where something like this, if implemented broadly, could have this maybe unintended consequence of strengthening support for the program, because it's no longer seen as this way we buy
Right.
Doritos and sugary drinks for low income people. If you look at the data, the shopping carts of SNAP and non-SNAP households do not really look that different. I mean, we've always seen differences in higher income people have more ability to buy fruits and vegetables and meats. And I mean, there is difference, of course, in what you can
Yeah.
afford. But if you just look across similar income level families who are on
It's
SNAP
about
or
the
not, it's
same.
so it's not like SNAP
That's
households are uniquely unhealthy. And it's not because of SNAP, right? I think a lot of the research would show that um, a lot of convenience foods are being bought because there's time poverty. Like, a lot of people are working multiple jobs, and also they might not have access. A lot of these healthier foods are more expensive, and so
So then what do you think of this argument? Do you think that
I,
it will reduce that stigma because now they'll see virtuous poor people buying beans
I
or,
mean,
and unprocessed foods?
I think we're going to be in the messy middle.
Yeah.
Because this is the other thing is, I mentioned the Krispy Kreme example. It's not like these changes wholesale knock out everything that a consumer would look at a shopping cart and say is unhealthy. Like, potato chips in many places are still going to be allowed, but maybe not Twinkies, like we said. So it's it
How does
is
that
it
work?
really?
Potato chips, but not Doritos? Like, is that the
Well,
kind of thing? Because there's the
if you just focus on highly processed desserts
I see.
and not all highly processed foods, it's in every state's different. So every state's handling this differently. And so now
Smart food for all.
we're seeing states, if you live on a border, right? And you live
Yeah.
close to their state, you just hop over. It depends on where the retailer's located. I think unless you're shopping online, if you're shopping online, it's where your EBT card was issued that governs the regulation. So you could drive, across the border to Michigan and not. So there's all
It's
sorts of
like dry no, it's
complexity
like
here.
dry and wet counties, like,
Mhm.
I have family in Mississippi. My uncle was at school at Oxford, which was, I believe, dry at the time,
Like the
and
whole
you'd
city. Yeah.
yeah, and you'd have to drive out to the next county, and there were,
Mhm.
like, gas stations right on the border with,
Yeah.
cases of beer, sitting out ready to go. It did not, as far as I could tell, at least in my experience in Mississippi, reduce drinking to have this in that county or otherwise.
Mhm.
Might have increased some drunk driving because you might crack a beer after you went across the county line to get it, but
Yeah.
maybe we'll have the, big bins of Doritos lined up on one side of the county line and, oranges and apples on the other.
Well, it's gonna be interesting. I really hope this is studied. So there's so all the states are supposed to do
Yeah.
basically um an evaluation of what happens, right? But I'm really concerned. A lot of people are concerned that these are not going to be rigorous. I have a lot of researchers who are we really need to make sure there's money to really study what happens. Is this an intervention that does help improve health outcomes or not? Is this a complex, messy thing that isn't really worth doing? And we don't know the answer to that. And in that way, we're embarking on a big research project that, we'll see.
Yeah.
One side note here is that I think it's so interesting that RFK Jr. gets a lot of credit for this, even though technically it was a Brooke Rollins policy. I mean, it's under USDA that they're allowing these waivers. And it's just sort of an interesting twist that the biggest substantive change to federal policy has happened over at USDA, not under HHS in terms of food. So I don't know. It's an
I think that's
interesting.
an interesting point. You could ask the same question, like, would, let's say, Biden had won or Kamala had won and we had a Democratic president, would these things have happened at the state level? I think probably not, right?
Well,
Like,
I do
just
think this was
these specific
inevitable. I
ones,
think this
these
was
specific ones.
I think actually the idea that a state or two would
Yeah.
try this out was inevitable. Eventually, and I'd been hearing that even during the Biden administration there was some shifting thought on this. around allowing a state to test it out, a state or two, right, to see
Yeah.
what happened, right?
But
To
not
then
18.
yes, I don't
Yeah.
see a scenario where this broad scale adoption would have
And it's
happened. Yeah.
pretty much all red states, right? I think there may be a purple one or two.
Colorado,
Colorado, yeah.
I can't remember Hawaii. You can look at the map. There's a SNAP
Yeah.
restrictions map at USDA.gov.
But it's
It's
mostly
mostly
red.
red, but
Yeah.
there are some exceptions to that.
I mean, that suggests that maybe, that that although research is welcome and
Ongoing,
necessary, that
hopefully.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, but that it's probably this is splitting along partisan lines, and you have a Republican Party that is anti-SNAP, and they view this as a way to limit SNAP more than anything else, right?
So my memory on this polling is that it's fairly popular across party lines, but it's interesting. I don't know that I've seen the
But I
polling
could see the poll
recently.
be popular for both parties because, again, I think it is somewhat universal that people have at the very best, a sense of disrespect for the poor. And when they see them in the store buying things with their SNAP cards, it seems to anger everyone of
Because they're
all
like,
parties.
those,
Yeah,
my taxpayer dollars.
exactly.
I
But the party that is much more likely to implement that kind of a change is the one that is more committed towards undermining and limiting and potentially getting rid of SNAP, and that's the Republican Party.
I do think there's more ideological alignment, yes, on the idea that Republicans are trying to rein in SNAP. They're trying to shrink that program. They've been very clear about this. I do think that aligns. But when I first started reporting on SNAP, it was actually the Democrats that wanted to do this. It's changed a lot because there's been a lot of arguments made that this is
Which
not
Democrats do you remember? Was it anybody still
I
around?
think Rosa DeLauro at one point
Okay.
was on this. And public health, like left-leaning public health researchers were absolutely the ones for this. It has shifted a lot over time. A lot of that had to do with looking at things like who would actually be affected. This disproportionately affects communities of color. This disproportionately affects probably folks who are not getting a say they're not getting a say in the policy, right? So
Right. They're not choosing this policy,
yeah,
but
there's
they
a
have to
lot
live it
of
out. Yeah.
there's a lot of shifting that has happened in this
Mm.
debate. But it was originally, when I started covering this, it was a left-leaning idea. It was a
That's a
left-wing
really
thing.
interesting point. So let's say there is meaningful oversight of this and research, and the results come back, and it is in fact good for public health, right? It's good for the health of the people on the nutritional benefit. The benefit nutritionally for people on SNAP can be demonstrated. This is a good thing. Do those same left-leaning politicians and perhaps advocacy groups, do they accept that, even though, it's a Trump policy, it's a red policy, it's a HHS and RFK Jr. MAHA policy? What do they do with that information?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I don't know how that will play out politically. Yeah, I really don't. The one other interesting thing, not to totally dodge, but I really don't know the answer to that. When we saw the soda tax debates happen in places like San Francisco, there was some discussion, and I think there was actually some research that showed that even just the debate about the soda tax reduced consumption of soda, like even before it was taxed, or like that was part of the overall reduction was the public debate
It
you
got
had.
people thinking, hey, maybe I shouldn't
Well,
drink
yeah,
so much soda.
it's like, well,
Yeah.
they're taxing it. This is like starting to put it in a category like cigarettes
Yeah.
or alcohol, right?
Mhm.
And so and sometimes in the past we've seen huge fights over what can be in and out of WIC, and it's oftentimes not really about WIC. It's about the message that it sends to moms or the message that it sends to low-income shoppers or whatever. And so I do wonder if there aren't some other effects to this. Like if you're going to, in hundreds of thousands of grocery stores, post a list of like what the government doesn't want you to buy with SNAP, like does that affect, that's a really interesting question too. Like, does that affect other consumers? Like, do they make different choices or does it not? Does everyone just get lost in the chaos of it?
I have
I
a
don't
funny
know.
thought from this, because when I was growing up, the cookie that we never wanted to get because we as children perceived it as being healthier than the other cookies was the Fig Newton.
Ugh,
right? And it was
yeah.
like, "Oh, there's figs in that." Actually, now if I get a fig Newton, I'm very happy. I think they're delicious. But I
They're
mean,
fine. Yeah.
yeah, but but I wonder if there'll be, like, some of these, like, healthy seeming cookies that will come back, some ways to get
Yeah,
around the law by, like,
right.
"We put
They'll
a
have
we
a
put a little
surge,
spinach
yeah.
in your ice cream. It's gonna you won't taste it, it's there, but we it gets us over the health, uh,
Yeah.
uh,
I think fig
threshold."
Newtons are, like, mostly safe. W That's an interesting question, like, in Florida, can you buy a fig Newton? That would be a good one to look at, like,
Right.
does that count? That probably does count as an ultra
Fig
processed
Newtons or
dessert.
smart, the seemingly healthy, but not any healthier than the other
Smart
ones, foods like
choice or
Smart
whatever,
Food.
yeah.
Like, I love Smart Food, it's got all that pasty, whatever, powdery cheese stuff on it. I can't imagine it's any healthier than those Doritos that I also equally love, but I don't know if one falls under the law and the other does not.
Yeah, right now, I think most of the states are targeting sugar sweetened beverages and candy and things that are
Yeah,
sweet, and so for now, your,
for now.
smart is it
But
called
what
Smart
about
Pop?
drinks like
Yeah.
what about drinks that are, sort of juice, but they have they're hopped up with sugar, they're like where do
Every
the
state's
yeah,
different, so
yeah.
every state is defining it differently, um, so it depends. Depends, check your state's website for
That
more information, it's gonna be, really
should be
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
More to come. So why don't we transition from that fun discussion into our final segment, which is something that we usually call good vibes, but in this case is just good and strange, right? So why don't you? This was your idea. You tell us about this video.
Yeah, so HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. posted, I think this was ahead of Christmas, posted an AI generated video of Santa Claus getting a phone call from him, like getting a cell phone call.
Yes.
And he's like, you can't make out what he's saying, but essentially it seems like RFK Jr. is telling Santa to get on the MAHA bandwagon. And then it breaks to this montage, like kind of like Rocky esque, like
No,
training.
not Rocky-esque. It
It's
is Eye
literally,
of the
yeah.
Tiger.
And Santa's like doing like bench presses with a candy cane. I mean, it's like this very funny AI video, right? Honestly, for all the AI like slop out there that's like super messed up and harmful, this was very light and joyful and like, it was silly. But what struck me about this video is AI compilation. And by the way, of course, Santa gets fit and is like
Oh
on
yeah,
Team
he's ripped.
Maha
He is
at the
ripped. Look
end
at all the pull-ups he can do now.
is that like it just shows you how much the politics on this stuff has shifted. Like you would never have seen another politician like touch Santa of all the icons and talk about health and like maybe he should have a carrot,
It would just be the happy holidays,
within yeah,
figure
like
getting shit.
it was just untouchable, and I really think it's a sign that the politics on this have shifted so much. Like, these are okay things to say now, even if people are like, "Ha ha," like, "Leave Santa alone." It sort of fits in with, a couple of weeks before the holidays, RFK Jr. had a pull-up contest with,
Yes.
the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy. Is that his name? Anyway, Duffy.
Was I thought Pete Hesketh was doing. Weren't they
No, they well, this is
all the testosterone dudes were out there doing pull-ups?
I think there's like a Hegseth challenge. I'm not really not clear. Okay. Like I'm not good at pull-ups because I'm so tall. Maybe people don't know about this. I'm 6'1". It's hard for me to do a pull-up, even though I'm pretty strong. I'm just gonna put that out there. So like
You're an athlete, right?
I'm an
Weren't you like
athlete.
a volleyball
I
player?
yes, and at most in my life I've been able to do one pull-up. And I'll work on it. I'm all for the like physical challenges. I'm good for it.
I'm
But
not saying how many pull-ups I can do. I'm gonna leave that to the imagination.
so yeah, breaking news. I can't do any pull-ups right now. But I'm all for it. But it's like it's a reminder that this is not seen now as this like it used to be seen as kind of rude to tell the American people like that they
To
needed
get in
to
shape?
exercise
Yeah.
more or whatever. And now it's like not. And like
Although, I mean,
it's like
Arnold
a nanny
Schwarzenegger was
state
doing
thing.
that,
Yeah, but
right?
like it used to be seen as like this nanny state thing. Like the
Yeah.
government shouldn't be like and I feel like that we've just blown through that gate. And now there's
Now
a
it's
pull-up bar at the airport in
now
DC.
it's Sylvester Stallone-like figure who's actually Santa doing,
Yeah.
arm curls with a candy cane. We are in
Maybe that
definitely a
should
different
be
space.
my 2026
Uh,
resolution
I have
is
sort of like
pull-ups.
two
Yeah.
two sort of responses to that. So one, it's like, well, it doesn't really fit into the GLP world that we are moving into, but you can still
No,
have fun
I
and
don't
watch a
think these are
video.
mutually exclusive.
Right.
You gotta be active and you have to lift. You're gonna lose too much muscle on a GLP-1.
Absolutely. The other thing, though, is I think that it is in no way a threat to my actual favorite Christmas song, which is not "The Eye of the Tiger." It is "Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer." So I think that song is still
You're safe.
ready to pump out the jams.
Yeah.
Um, all
Yeah.
right, Helena, I
Yeah.
think on that very strange note, we should call it a
Go watch the
day.
video. Yeah.
Yeah, go watch the video, all of you, and we will see you all back in a couple of weeks. And Helena, thank you as always. I love talking to you about food and politics. So I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Let's do it again soon. Bye.